there's a word which we use, which is typically growth mindset.
Right.
So I think, the lack of having a growth mindset is the biggest stumbling block to any kind of change. You may be in a business which may be hit by all the changes that is happening. For example, traditional trade being hit by e-commerce business.
Right.
You can close your eyes and forget about it, but the fact remains that if you decide to forget about it for long enough, it will get you in a way that you will not be able to recover.
But I had this question in my mind, and a lot of people have asked me this.
Yeah.
That we have an idea for a book.
Yeah.
We want to write a book. But how do we actually publish it? Like, how do you deal with the publisher? How do you get it out in the market?
Yeah.
Can you please shed some light on that?
So actually writing a book and publishing today can be also a very easy affair.
I just wanted to ask you, you have a lot of leadership coaching skills and you talk to a lot of people, and I'm sure you're helping people change in a positive way. Where do people generally drop the ball?
Very, very clear about the objectives you wanted to achieve. Typical what we call a A-type personality. However, completely missing on the emotional intelligence side. So much so that this company was dealing with huge attrition in their sales force, primarily because nobody wanted to work with this leader. And this guy was technically fairly competent, and they in fact were looking at taking him to the next role, which would be the sales and marketing director, and maybe eventually sometimes even a CEO of the company.
You talk to a lot of leaders, so what kind of qualities do you see in them, in a good leader?
Leaders who understand that they may not know everything. They may not have answers to everything.
I want to ask you like a very open question. Is what one advice you have for people who are starting out their careers, one who have been working for like 10, 15 years, and one for the leadership? What would those be?
So let me start from the leadership. I think.
Hello and welcome to Talking Through. Today we have a very interesting guest for you on the show. He's a leadership coach, strategy consultant, and also a new author. So welcome, Sandeep.
Thank you so much.
Thank you for coming.
Thanks for getting me here. Thank you.
Absolutely. Before we start anything, for the benefit of the audience, so that they know you better, could you briefly introduce yourself?
Yeah, so Dipankar, as you started, so I've had a corporate career, spent about 25 years in corporate life, finance and business leadership roles. Started in India, but have worked mostly across Asia Pacific for about 10 years. Came back to India in 2016, and that's when I started my own company, let's say, and that's called Value Unlocked. Yeah. And as you were, telling the audiences, basically I work in, I would say, 3 domains. 2 domains you did mention was in leadership coaching, where I work with senior leaders, organization-sponsored engagements, where we work on competencies, culture, capabilities, sometimes with individual leaders and sometimes with teams. The second piece of work that I do is strategy consulting. And my work in strategy consulting is a bit more execution-focused, which means helping companies stay on the course on their transformation journeys. It's also sometimes about revenue growth, sometimes about cost efficiencies, digital transformation. And I do a bit of work around innovation and design thinking, more the process side of it, how to hold innovation and, ideation alive in companies, something around that stuff. And obviously the third domain is a bit in the startup ecosystem. And I'm very actively involved, have been an investor for about 7 years now, invested in about 25 odd startups, so very active in the startup ecosystem as well.
Right. Thank you so much for introducing yourself, and that's a lot that you do. Before we go any further, and since your most recent endeavor has been the book, Chase the Chance, can you tell us a little bit about how did that idea came about? And how did you write the book? What are you sending the message across?
Yeah. So I would say that I've been actually writing for some years, and it's been more in terms of short form, long form articles. And I've written for CFO. I've written for, there's a International Coaching Federation blog. I've written for also the Forbes Coach Council. I've been a contributor there. So I've been writing, but I never thought of actually writing a book until COVID happened.
Oh, really?
So for me, this was the happiness I found in those very trying times, I would say. And the book, the idea and the writing of the book, the first manuscript, everything happened during COVID, actually. And the idea with which I approach the book is that I work in the leadership coaching space, which is all about change and changing and helping people change. And I thought it's a great opportunity to kind of, put some of the learnings together, which either I have had as part of my own change journey or what I have helped people deal with and come on the better side of change.
Yeah.
So that's how the book actually came about. Chase the change. So
I mean, I've read the book, so I'm going to ask you a few questions about the book.
Sure.
But I had this question in my mind, and a lot of people have asked me this.
Yeah.
That we have an idea for a book.
Yeah.
We want to write a book.
Yeah.
But how do we actually publish it? Like, how do you deal with the publisher? How do you get it out in the market?
Yeah.
Can you please shed some light on that?
Yeah. So actually writing a book and publishing today can be also a very easy affair. So you have two formats of publishing. One, what is typically called traditional publisher, which means you will go to a Penguin or as I went to Rupa and they will publish the book for you. The second is that you can do what is called self-publishing. And there are a lot of companies available which will do self-publishing, which means that you can actually, even the third option is you can just launch a digital version of your book and just upload it on Amazon. And that's really what it is. So, but the two prominent ones are basically traditional and self-publishing. I had a bit wanted always to go for traditional publishing. And the reason being because the publisher also adds a little bit of credibility to the book.
Right.
Because otherwise anybody can write anything and you can go and have it published really. So that was the idea. And for me, the journey was not that easy. Actually, it set me back by about 6-8 months. Because when this book was conceived and the first manuscript was approved by a company called Sage, which is big time into education and business books. Unfortunately, just 2 weeks before it was to be published, actually the print run was to happen. Sage US announced that they're going to close the Sage business books division in India. So that's when I didn't want to go ahead because if they were going to wrap up their team who will promote the book and all that stuff. So I got the IP back and then I had to re-pitch the book. Yeah. So, and then that's how Rupa happened in part of the repitching. And then, obviously every publisher has their own standards. They go through the book again, they suggest some edits and all that stuff. So that happened. Yeah. So that set me back a little bit. Oh, yeah. So, and to your point, if you were to kind of, reach out to traditional publishers, either you can take an agent, or you can just write to the publishers. Everybody on their website has where you can submit a manuscript and then if they like it, they pick up.
That's favorite. I mean, I think it's very valuable information for a lot of upcoming authors. So I read the book.
Yes.
Found it very interesting. Some of the things I've also used in my everyday professional life or, coaching people a little bit, even my own team.
Yes.
You have mentioned about the Wonder Code of Change.
Yes.
Right? Can you tell us a little bit more about it?
Yeah. So let me tell you the story behind the story first.
Yeah.
So actually this book and the idea centered around wonder. And so wonder framework is what I had conceptualized. And in fact, at some point in time, my working title for the book was and something around wonder framework for a better life and something like that. So I created the wonder framework and then I layered it up with the psychology of change and why people don't change, etc. And so that's how there was ends which were built in. And I think why I'm sharing this is for people who are writing books.
Right.
Sometimes the books cannot be written in a serial kind of format. So a lot of times you put content together and then you kind of move it around
and you piece it together.
Yeah, piece it together. So that's really what it is. So yeah, Wonder is a framework. I would say it's a acronym which stands for, and each alphabet stands for something in the process of change. And I believe that if you use this framework, it can help you be with any change that you want to make it online. And I'm really saying any change because it's so intuitive. Yeah, Wonder, as I was telling you, is an acronym that we use. I use for basically the entire process of change, and every word in Wonder stands for something which is an intrinsic part of the process of change. And when I tell you what it is, and I'm sure you've read it also, as you said, we realize that if you miss even one of it, then the change may not happen. So what does Wonder stand for? The W in Wonder stands for the why and what of change. So I think the most important thing is what is it that you want to change. And even more important is why you want to make that change. Because we in the coaching space believe that once you are convinced that you want to have that change, you will find a way to make that change happen. So I think the why and what of change is 1W is. O is about owning the change. And while I use the phrase owning the change, for me, it means organizing the change, which means you can make time for it and do a whole lot of things. You may also decide that you will not do something else because you're going to focus on this. All that is part of organizing. The N stands for starting now. Because the more time you give yourself, once you've decided to make a change, I think your chances of making that change start decreasing. Because you lose your motivation, environment acts against you, so many things happen, right? And then D is about discipline of doing, which means that before you get fully immersed in that change and really put all your energy behind it, you need to look at what are the kind of habits you need to build. And the discipline of doing is a little bit about those habits, about creating a certain calendar for yourself so that you are able to do those even if in small measures. E is about escalating the energy. Once you build the habits, how do you put more energy, effort behind whatever change you want to make? And then R is about reflecting on the new reality, which means that, one, knowing that you've done what you wanted to do, and also think about what will it take for you to still remain in a maintenance kind of zone. Because if you give away that change, then you may forget about it completely.
Right.
The other is maybe, as I advise, sometimes a good way to imbibe a change is also to help somebody else make that change. So mentoring somebody or helping other people make that same change, I think again is another part of reflecting on the new reality, as I call it. So so that's what Mantra stands for.
Very, very interesting. And I would say it's a really great way to put it. And thinking about it, I just wanted to ask you, you have a lot of leadership coaching experience and you talk to a lot of people, and I'm sure you're helping people change in a positive way. Where do people generally drop the ball, right, in their process? It's so you know the what and the why, and you are going through the process. Where do you think it kind of derail a little bit?
As I, also talk about it in the book, I think most of us we are two people rolled in one.
Yeah.
So there is a thinker and a doer.
Right.
The thinker is very agile, always making grand plans, wanting to do fantastic things, wanting to shoot for stars. The doer is a lazy bugger, doesn't want to move off the couch. And I think most of the challenges around change happen not so much in the thinking space. I think we intrinsically know what we want to change, why we want to change. It's about moving to the next step, which is making that change. So it's really, and that's why the tagline of the book is also bridging the gap between thinking and doing, because that's really the challenge for most people.
Right.
You ask anybody today, what do you want to be? Everybody will say, I want to do this, I want to do this, I want to do that. But then what are you doing about it?
Yeah.
So that's where the ball stops. And then I think as people, we most of the times don't take opportunities or find it challenging to step outside of our comfort zone. And all the learning that we can think of actually happens only outside the
Right. Exactly. Talking about change and also comfort zones and how if you don't change in time and in the right manner, what kind of societal or economic pitfalls do you see because of that?
See, actually, both at an individual, society, and even at the level of nation or, global population, I think change is a way of life. It is going to happen. We can take an ostrich attitude and, just dig our heads into the ground and say nothing is happening and we are fine with the way we are. But then if you do that, it's going to hit you when you will not be able to deal with it. So you obviously have to always either stay at par with the changes that are happening or even sometimes stay ahead of the course. And I think the economic and the societal fallouts obviously is from an economic standpoint, whether it's an individual or a country, I think, you may be in a business which may be hit by all the changes that is happening. For example, traditional trade being hit by e-commerce business.
Right.
You can close your eyes and forget about it, but the fact remains that if you decide to forget about it for long enough, it will get you in a way that you will not be able to recover. Right. So I think, being able to deal with change in a positive way, get started at the right time, stay the course, and be positive about it, I think, are important aspects, whether it is growth of individuals or growth of societies.
Right. Because I also feel that sometimes we take an upcoming change, a need for a change, like a threat rather than an opportunity.
Yes, absolutely.
And that really derails your thought and stops you from, evolving as a person.
Yeah, and you make a very good point, Dipankar, because it's actually, if you are able to reframe that fear as a challenge, I think it makes all the difference.
Right. Exactly. That. So, also, in your experience, talking to so many leaders, and I'm sure you're in touch with so many organizations, individuals, why do you think change is so difficult to make? What are some of the factors that it makes it like really difficult to execute on the ground?
So you were talking about individual change or organizational change?
Both. At both levels, would you share?
I think individual I touched upon a little bit. I think, lack of our, intention or resistance to kind of, get out of your comfort zone, try new things, explore new things, work on the change that you want. Being active about change rather than being passive and a recipient of change. So I think individually, and, there's a word which we use, which is typically growth mindset.
Right.
So I think, the lack of having a growth mindset is the biggest stumbling block to any kind of change that possibly could happen.
Right.
So I think for individuals, that's what it is. For organizations, I think a big piece is, for leaders to be able to take people along in the process of change. And I do a lot of work in the strategy consulting space, and which is all about change and transformation, etc. And I've realized that once you're able to take people along, I think you put a different kind of energy in that change process. Your chances of winning at that change are so much higher.
Right.
And I think that is one thing which a lot of organizations and leaders forget, to take people along. I also think that if you can involve them even at the stage when you are co-creating your strategy or the change, when you're creating your strategy or change, and if you can involve them and co-create that strategy or the change that you want, it's much easier then to implement. Because people already start owning some of the things in which they have been also party to that creation.
Right.
So, organizations need to think about it, that how can we involve people more in this process of change.
If the process is more inclusive,
Yeah.
it kind of breaks down that threat perception a little bit, right?
Absolutely.
So, which brings me to my next question. You talk to a lot of leaders. So, what kind of qualities do you see in them in a good leader? What do you think are the top 3-4 qualities that we have?
I think the world certainly is changing, and it's changing fast. And clearly, I think leaders who understand that they may not know everything, they may not have answers to everything, I think are the leaders which I probably think have more chances of success or creating successful businesses. Where you leverage the teams that you have, you are able to inspire people, you have the right kind of creativity, innovation, exploratory mindset. Besides the technical skills, you have the soft skills, the competencies, emotional intelligence, those are the kind of leaders which have more chances of success in today's world, especially, where it's very difficult for one individual to have all the answers.
Right. Absolutely.
So for me, that's really the other end. I think leaders who are also self-aware, again, do a much better job of their leadership responsibilities. And when I say self-aware, people who understand what are the strengths they have and what are the areas of improvement they themselves have, because no leader can be complete in all respects, And while you may have some areas of improvements, if you're conscious of that, I think it's much better. You will do something about it, let's say.
And when you talk to the leaders in the industry, what kind of challenges they come to you with? Like, how do you provide them counsel with?
So, my work in the leadership goes coaching space is, as I said, most of my work is organization sponsored, and organizations would either, hire me to work with the concerned leader because they may be preparing that leader for the next role, and there are certain expectations from that leader for the next role, and helping the leader build those new competencies. That is one opportunity. Second is sometimes people have stepped into a new role because of certain change or whatever, and then again they need that support as they settle into the new role. And that's where again, sometimes people would take a coach to kind of work with that. And third, obviously, and I think for me, that's been a small piece of my work, but where genuinely organizations believe that a person needs to improve, in the sense that it's more like a part of his personal development plan, and development, when I say it's a personal improvement plan, they believe that this person is not coming to the level of, expectation on this particular role, and that is the reason needs to work with a coach.
Right.
And obviously in the coaching space, I must also say that a lot of the work is around behaviors, competences, not so much about technical. And those are the things that I spoke about,
Because through my experience also, I've realized that a lot of leaders, they come up the ranks because they're technically very skilled.
Yeah.
But then when they become leaders, they need a different kind of a skill set, which might not exist.
Absolutely.
So can you tell us an interesting story on that?
Yeah, sure. Why not? So, let me tell you a couple of them, honestly.
Yeah.
So one is about this, and I write about it in the book also, that one of the organizations that I was working with, so I was, I had one kind of head of sales as a coachee to work with. And this guy was phenomenal. He was a typical sales guy, I would say. Excellent with his numbers, delivering on or more than the budget. Very, very clear about the objectives he wanted to achieve. Typical what we call a A-type personality, However, completely missing on the emotional intelligence side. So much so that this company was dealing with huge attrition in their sales force, primarily because nobody wanted to work with this leader. And this guy was technically fairly competent, and they in fact were looking at taking him to the next role, which would be the sales and marketing director, and maybe eventually sometimes even a CEO of the company. And so this is one of the coaching engagements I can't forget, because I think it's also 6 months is not too long a period, and that's typically the engagements that I have. We work with a concerned leader for 6 months, but just in those 6 months, once he understood that this change can help him really succeed even more, and he needs now qualities which are different from what got him here to get to the next role. I think it was amazing to see how he pushed for it. Because as coaches, we can only be a catalyst. We can create that awareness. We can't be the change that they want. They have to do that, make that change happen for themselves, right?
Yeah.
So I think that was one. Second, very interesting one has been that, and this has been, I would say, an amazing experience for me. I worked with the public sector undertaking, and I was working with 4 executive director level people. They are people in the age bracket of about 54 to 56, another 4-5 years to retirement. And when I took this engagement, I thought that these people will be very reluctant to change. And also, PSU, you typically have a certain mindset about, the kind of leaders they would have. I was so pleasantly surprised. All these 4 people were amazingly positive about the opportunity the organization had provided it. Willingness to change, willingness to learn, willingness to try, even despite that age, despite that seniority, really left me very, very impressed, I would say. So in that case, I think a lot of success was about the mindset that they brought in, rather than, what I would have done with them otherwise.
Right.
Exactly. Yeah. So that was another exciting.
So both stories, I guess a lot of people will resonate with it, because sometimes when we are doing very well in life, we become lone warriors.
Yeah.
Like don't wolf attitude that we have, and then you realize, no, you need to go with the pack a little bit.
And also, I want to kind of make this point, because I'm also in that age bracket, now mid-50s. And so sometimes we take age as an excuse to not change. To not change. Yeah. This is the way I've lived my life. This is the way I'm going to do it. Yeah. But I think I would urge all the audiences who are going to listen to this, the fact is that, actually at some point in time, you should consider age as a number. Yeah. It's happening. It is going to happen. It doesn't mean that you should stop living. It doesn't mean you should stop learning and working on yourself. Yeah. Yeah. So I think, that was again, that is why this experience was very enriching for me.
Yeah, exactly. So also, I mean, in the last few years, I've also realized that I more clearly know what I need to do now. And I more clearly know that this is what I don't want.
Yeah.
And earlier, I think, and I'm sharing this on a personal level, that earlier I always thought of standing out of the crowd. Now I feel like being a part of the team.
Yeah.
That is the change that has intrinsically happened in me, which is, I think, has served me well.
Yeah,
I hope it's serving people around me well as well.
I'm sure.
But yeah, that's one change that I would want to talk about. I know that you also provide strategic consulting to a lot of your clients. What kind of topics do you take, and what is very close to your heart?
So my work in strategy consulting, a lot of it is about helping companies hold their transformation journeys together. And when I stepped into this field, I realized that while you have the big four the company is willing to invest with them, and rightly so, because they have that kind of skill set and that kind of, mind and ideas and stuff to create your strategy roadmaps. And companies invest in that, rightly so. The challenge that comes is, once the strategy roadmap is there, what do you do with implementation and strategy roadmap? Because then it's difficult to hire the consultants, the big ones, because it's a very costly affair to have somebody working with you over. And these transformation journeys take 15 to even more sometimes, 15 months to implement. Yeah. So the space that I work in is helping companies hold that transformation journey together, which means I'll provide the project governance around it. I will help them do the project charters. I will work with the project teams to make sure every project keeps moving. So, all those kind of things, steering committee meetings, project meetings, ideation, get involved in the execution side of things and make sure that, you keep cruising along your strategy roadmap.
Right.
So that's the kind of work that I do. And obviously, as part of that work, sometimes you're working on the revenue side, sometimes you're working on cost side, sometimes you're working on digital, because digital is something you can't ignore today. Every strategy is about digital transformation. There's something new is happening. So, we're just, before this, we were talking about AI, and I think a lot of companies have that on their agenda.
Right.
Yeah. And I may not be a technical expert. What I do is basically more from the business lens. What is it the business needs, and what are kind of the solutions available in the market which can help them get there?
Yeah. And I might be digressing a little bit, but since you brought up, project management in the discussion, what do you think when a project is running, what are some of the things that everybody should keep in mind that they don't get derailed in between?
So the most important thing is, I think, to be absolutely clear when you start that what is it that you are expecting. And that is why I believe, irrespective of the size of the organization, the kind of transformation, to have an absolutely clear project charter right in the beginning. You understand what you are wanting to work on. You understand what are the risks involved, what are going to be the timelines, who's going to work on it, who's the sponsor, who's the owner, what's the project team, and if there are key risks involved, what are those key risks? So I think for me, that is the first thing. The second thing is that ensure that you create that project team. And when you create that project team, let everybody not be doing this on the side. A lot of organizations believe he will do this or she will do his day-to-day task and also do this.
Right. It's an extra activity.
So you have to make sure that you give them the opportunity to succeed by ensuring that they have enough energy and time to put to that project. So that's the second piece. The third piece is that as the project is working towards its logical conclusion, what kind of milestones do you set? How often do you review these? Who reviews it? if there are any bottlenecks or hurdles, roadblocks, who's going to help them kind of take care of them? A lot of times you need stakeholders, which project team may not be able to kind of, get them, either get their ear or may not have enough influence to do it. So there, I think then the sponsor of the project kind of steps in. Yes. So all these things, I think, help you kind of create a successful journey.
Yeah, that's great advice. Actually, I can take it out.
I'm sure with your experience.
Also, you were speaking about while you were introducing yourself that you are very closely connected with the startup ecosystem. So tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah. So, I think 3 formats in which I engage with startups. One is I've been an investor, I was saying, so about 25 odd investments since the time I started. Second is I also do some mentoring, and some of that is with some of the IIMs and IITs and, some of those institutions which have their incubators and accelerators. And they have startups there, and I would work with some of them as a mentor. So that's the second piece. Third is that where I have either as part of my investments or otherwise, startups which have very, I am comfortable that they have industry-ready solutions. There, I may also help them with opening doors to large clients, which means helping them on the business development side. So these are typically the 3 formats in which I engage with startups.
Right. And is there something that is a certain industry or a topic or a product that is close to your heart that you feel that this should succeed?
No, I am. I've had, I would say, as it happens in startups, I've had, obviously, I think 4 of my startups have already failed.
Okay.
Let's first own that up. Yeah. So it's not all great stuff. But then the few which have done well, I think one of them, which is in the energy efficiency space, has done extremely well. Another one, which is actually a private investor network and a private accelerator, they have done reasonably well. I have some investments in a US startup fund, which has done well. I think, some of the things and obviously there's no flavor which will continue for all times, but the current flavors and where we are seeing growth is fintech. Let's agree to that. Climate tech, energy, ESG, that kind of space. I think health, at some point in time during COVID, edutech had become big, but I think now they are having their own challenges there. So obviously e-commerce, quick commerce is certainly here to stay. There's no way. I was one of those, to be honest, who believed that nobody really would be excited by quick commerce. But now you look at it, and even I can't stay without. So I think that's things change. Absolutely.
We've spoke about a lot of your professional experience. So let me ask you, what do you do in your free time? What are your passions? How do you keep yourself busy in your personal time?
Yeah, so I'm a bit of I try to live the book.
Yeah.
So I'm a bit very curious and very exploratory. I want to do things differently. And I think that's one of the reasons that even in terms of work, I have so many different spaces in which I work, because I'm energized by the diversity of ideas, people, environment. And, that's what kind of energizes me. And in my personal space also, I think, so I'm a bit of a runner. I've been now, for about 15 years, I've been a runner, have run marathon. So that's been obviously a continuing passion. A yoga enthusiast. A year ago, I took to trekking. So just 2 months ago, did the Everest Base Camp trek, over 12-hour-day trek. So it was fantastic. Yeah. I like poetry, writing, reading, Indian, Hindustani, ghazal, that kind of music. What else? I like to, as I said, try new things. These days I'm trying I can't say hands, but feet at dancing. That's all.
Which is great. It keeps you fit and agile.
Exactly.
Yes. I want to ask you a very open question, which is, what one advice you have for people who are starting out their careers one who have been working for like 10, 15 years, and one for the leadership, what would those be?
So let me start from the leadership. I think heightened sense of self-awareness. I think to be able to seek feedback from others and to work on that. I think the more senior you get, the more close you become to feedback. And I think in today's environment, that can really cost you your career, I would say. So I think that's one lesson for senior leaders. For mid management, I think to continue to learn, that's an important piece. We were talking about artificial intelligence. Now you can take a view that, okay, it's not going to impact me, or what can I do about it, etc. But then I think people who will succeed and make great careers henceforth are people who will be able to live with these technologies, who will be willing to explore them, understand them, use them. Right? So I think to be able to stay in that course of learning. And for people who are just about beginning, I think to stay curious about the industry, about business, about what's happening. I think the openness to understand how things work, the curiosity of questioning, and because at that point you have all liberty. Nobody is expecting you to carry a shitload of knowledge with you. Honestly, you can ask anything and you can explore anything. So use that opportunity before it's too late.
Yeah. I mean, failure comes at a cheaper cost.
Yeah, exactly. So, absolutely.
So yeah, I mean, that's great advice for, I guess, all the three cohorts. Before we wrap this up, I just wanted to show this book to the audience. This is Chase the Change, written by Sandeep Jain. My last question.
Yes.
How are you adopting this book in your life?
Oh, how am I adopting? I spoke about a lot of things. So I try and, every 6 months or so, I try and pick up something which is new to me. And I try and get on the better side of it. So these days on the personal side, it's dancing.
Good.
And to be honest, on the professional side, it's a bit what we were talking about, leveraging AI for my work.
Right.
As my thinking partner. I'm using AI as my thinking partner or a whole lot of stuff. So I think those are the two things that I'm working on. 6 months else, probably it'll be something else.
Yeah. Then again, when we speak to you after 6 months, maybe you will tell us a little bit more about what has changed. But thank you so much.
Thank you
for coming to talking through, speaking to us, giving us a lot of enlightened advice, and thank you on behalf of our team and also the audience.
Thank you so much, Dipankar. It's been a privilege coming here. Thank you, and I hope your audiences will like it and maybe get to understand a few more things about change. And I think, again, my final piece of advice to everybody who's going to listen to this is going to be: get out of your comfort zone, explore the world, and there's so much interesting things happening around. So take advantage of that.
Thank you so much for watching. This was Sandeep Jain. He was a leadership coach, consultant, and also an author. His book, Chase the Change, has helped me change a little bit about in my life as well, that too in a positive way. So whenever you get time, read the book. It's available on Amazon. And if you have any questions for Sandeep, drop us in the comment section and we will get back to you. Thank you so much. Bye.